thanks again for joining us. This is, I believe, our final interview for KubeCon. So we're at day 3, the last day, and saving the best for last, of course. Again, I'm Fed Aldrich, developer advocate at Equinix, and we have with us Steven.
I am out of the office, actually.
You're in our office. So,
I am in your office. Steven Augustus, head of OpenSource at Cisco. I do some contributions here and there around the open source ecosystem. Yeah.
Awesome. So, I mean, Cisco, I think for the sake of most folks, like Cisco is the name of the switches that were in the office job they used to work.
Yes.
Like, so what's head of open source at Cisco? Like, how does that tie into like what Cisco does?
How even, right?
Yeah.
So I think about it too, and I got my start doing networking. And
same. I think that's where we're largely into it all too. Yeah.
Yeah, like reading, reading the CCNA exam guides, like cover to cover, and kind of, and to be at Cisco years later, I think it's 16, 17 years since I got started, is wild. It's wild. It's different. It's not what I expected to be doing. Open source at Cisco is vast. We're a company of 80,000 plus folks, and we're not just, fun fact, we're not just a networking company, right? We do application, it's cloud native focus. We've got application observability, security, AI focuses. To be, in particular, I am part of Outshift, which is Cisco's emerging tech and incubation division. So, as loath as I am to say it, we're like, when you cringe when people say this, like, we're like a startup in a large enterprise, but we are. We really are. Right? Yeah. So we've got product engineering, marketing, the usual shape that you'd expect to see. Yeah. But then there are 2 teams that have kind of a global mandate across Cisco, right? Which is research, and then my group, the open source program office. So we run and try to execute open source strategy for the entirety of Cisco.
Wow, that's like a big, different types of strategy across the org and lots of different moving pieces for that.
So,
what's what does that coordination look like? Because obviously OSPO for different companies looks different.
Yeah.
I imagine some of it is like figuring out what you're using in-house and depending on, but also I imagine contributing back to different projects or...
Yeah, so we are, I think, to your point, OSPOs have these very different shapes.
Yeah.
I think depending on what company you're looking at and what they're trying to achieve, that kind of shapes, how the OSPO is molded. We're in a very unique position, and actually part of the reason I took the role.
Yeah.
Our OSPO, so my boss is the SVP of Outshift, and he reports to the Chief Strategy Officer for Cisco. So it's like, open source is part of strategy.
Yeah.
Right? If you look at the engineering, the aligned OSPOs, you get lots of outbound contributions, direct contributions, engineering work. You look at the OSPOs that are positioned near marketing, and then you get more of this DevRel flavored focus. You look at an OSPO positioned near legal, you've got more of that risk compliance, risk mitigation focus. To have it positioned with strategy means we try to interleave it in everything that we do. And I would say the first bit of that strategy is to let us be known. Again, we go back to this, Cisco is a networking company, right? That's the common line. We're not. And we have people who have decades of experience in open source programs, people who have founded foundations, right?
Oh, wow.
And continue to sit on governance boards, the technical advisory committees, et cetera, et cetera. I wish it happened just once, but a comment that I got a lot when I started at Cisco is oh wow, I didn't even know Cisco did open source until you joined. And as someone who's been in open source 6-7 years at this point, and having people who have decades of experience behind this, I was we have a perception problem, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So I think there are some of our we just had an offsite after Open Source Summit in Bilbao. Went over to Cisco office in Paris, we're like, let's hammer it out. Let's go figure out like what we're trying to do here. So there's like lots of documentation, internal advocacy, external advocacy. There's of course the compliance and risk management components of it all. There are the how do I ensure that my team is actively contributing to the projects that they're interested in, right?
Yeah,
because everyone that
I like those as a focus, right? Like,
yeah.
It's so easy to get in that mode of like consuming an open source project, and to think like, oh, are we actually giving back?
Are we giving back?
We're doing that, yeah.
And I mean, I think with some of what's emerging, software supply chain security, conversations around AI, conversations around deeper, more interesting networking paradigms. You see Cisco as not just a participant, but leading in that area, in those areas, right?
Yeah, that's really cool. I like that, especially as you mentioned emerging network paradigms, right? This is kind of something that I had thought of and had been thinking, like, again, coming in from networking, like it's always the thing I fascinates me, and like revisiting it periodically over the years, and you're like, oh, this is very different. Like, I have a talk that's a very back to basics, like the core of like how networking bleep and bloop. Like how little flash of light work.
Yes.
Because ultimately it's still we're still sending little like signals along copper wires and lights along plastic to like.
And we're having conversations, syntax.
But like most people's entry in cloud native is like pick a CIDR for your VPC.
Yes.
And it's like, well, I don't know what any of this means. Like, yeah, just pick some numbers, it'll be fine. And it's
hey, look,
surely this will cause no architecture problems later. Don't worry about it.
Too small. Just create another one.
Just create another one.
There is
reuse the same domain. Use the same networks. Okay.
Yeah,
that's not going to be
abstracting away.
That's not going to cause someone a big headache for that later when they try to merge.
Abstracting away the paradigms that you had to like know.
Yeah.
When you were doing it, I kind of love that there is I wouldn't say a laziness now, but I'm in a grateful position to I don't have to care, right? The cloud is someone else's computer, but like, the network is someone else's network. It's like everything is.
The irony there is at Equinix, it's us. We're the one whose computer and network
like,
it's
your network. So thank you for.
It's just it was that, and then like thinking of the OSI layer model, right? And I'm like, well, this was obsolete ages ago, so we'll look at TCP, which is still out of date because now like I'm like VLANs, which are layer 2, except that when they're not, and like layer 3, which happens here, which is routing and not switching, except every switch is layer 3 now anyway.
And it's like it's a blended family now. It's just like
with software-defined networking, it's like everything. All the rules are different. Everything happens on every layer, and also
it's happening all the time everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with someone earlier about we've been talking a lot in CNCF, which is the cloud native ecosystem, about like we know Kubernetes is the baby, the blueprint for a lot of these projects.
Yeah.
And the amounts of like, so I spent some time at CoreOS and Red Hat doing and Heptio and VMware.
There's not like to say Choreos.
Doing field engineering and solutions architecture work for a few years. And the amount of conversations you would have around like day 0, day 1 operations, right? And that is supposed to be boring. The amount of, the amount of press as well around like Kubernetes is supposed to be boring. Cloud native is now boring. Like, let's make it boring. Let's make it presumed, right? Because that's not where the interesting stuff is supposed to be happening.
Right.
Ultimately, I have a conversation with you and someone else goes like, how can we sell a product that is delivering value to some customer somewhere? Right.
Yeah.
And that value is usually happening at the application layer. Right. Yeah. So the fact that we took so long, like years, to get to like Kubernetes is boring. What are we building on top of it? Right. But I think you still have to consider some of the, well, how do we make it all work? And it is in partnership with folks like Equinix, right? Where the community, we run a very large community and we are responsible for delivering safely and consistently a software project that is the largest Golang-based software project on the internet, open source, right? That doesn't happen without support, infrastructure support, right? And I think we've done a bunch of fighting and like, who are we going to get that support from, or who's consistently getting that support from? And Equinix is definitely on that list, right? So
yeah, that's one of the things I've enjoyed being able to say about working here is that the way our open source program works is being able to provide those infrastructure resources to projects that need that next level for distribution, for stability, and like,
or all of the ARM conversations, for example, right? Like, am I testing this on a Raspberry Pi? You're like, no,
we're testing it on a
you need to
massive
test it on
Ampere ARM server, right? Like it will work on a server. I know because I'm trying to
do it.
Which is important too, right? Like making sure it works on robust enterprise infrastructure. It works in a real environment and is tested in that way, and on not just a simple not a Raspberry Pi plug into your home switch. Like, no, it's running on a thing on a complex software-defined networking infrastructure.
Yeah. We have had some difficulties in the past with. So I'm part of. So I run the team that the SIG release that cuts Kubernetes, right?
Yeah.
So and I think when I came into the project, we were already distributing packages across multiple architectures, including ARM, including S390X.
Yeah.
And running into situations where we don't have infrastructure to test this on. We were distributing these packages with the presumption with so many of our test suites were built at the time around AMD 64, right?
Yeah.
And so there is a disparity in the coverage that we were able to provide, right? So again, in partnership with folks like Equinix, we're able to actually build something that we feel some level of confidence in.
Some level of confidence is important.
Right. I'm being very careful with the words.
You're like, this will work.
This will absolutely work. No worries. No, some level of confidence. No.
Why are you winking like that? No, it's really good. And I love that this comes back to, because I had similar conversations. This keeps coming back to a collaboration of people, right? Like that it's not just, we're embracing using these open source projects or we're contributing back to this, but you also have to collaborate with all these different groups and achieve consensus and
I'll tell you, the hardest part is I think it's beautiful, but it's also the hardest part is the people, right?
Yeah.
Once you get to a certain level in these communities, it's no longer about the technology.
Right.
I couldn't tell you, reaching into Kubernetes, reaching into a lot of the projects that I work on right now, I couldn't tell you day to day what's happening on the ground.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But my job has become sustainability of the community, from the thinking about the contributor to maintainer angle, thinking about how we are participating across multiple ecosystems to get that work done. It takes many hands and it takes an active effort. And so if you think you need to be a developer to get involved, you don't. We need marketers, we need tech writers, we need project program management skills. Seeing what happens when that doesn't exist in a project is something.
I can imagine. What's the has there been something that's been surprising at all as far as what you didn't expect to encounter running open source office, or?
Again, it's a lot less about hands-on keyboard, right?
Yeah.
And so there is that, that itch that you have every now and again. You're like, I'm gonna hack on something. It's happening. Today's my hack day. But it's so much more about the people, right? And investing in their, not just making sure that they feel like they're in a good work environment, but also ensuring that you're pushing the boundaries of their professional growth in communities, right?
Nice.
Pushing them to attain these governance roles, pushing them to have deeper conversations, pushing them to do travel internationally and do the talk. Don't be scared to do that talk, right? Yeah. So it's really cool. The folks on my team are right now Jason, Natalie, Lilia, and Severin. And Severin just got elected to the Open Telemetry Governance Committee.
Oh, amazing!
Natalie is on one of the chairs for SIG Docs. Jason is one of the maintainers for multiple things. I think, in the past, Tinkerbell as well, right?
Yeah.
Cluster API. He's done lots of work in the Kubernetes community. And Lilia is diving into chaos and our metrics.
Neat.
Yeah.
Neat. To get very meta on that for folks, probably a lot of folks don't know what chaos is that are watching it because it's the community measurement.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That is a very meta people way of being involved in the measurement of
the measurement of
that you're also involved in that sort of thing too.
And I'd be remiss to not mention To-Do Group. To-Do Group is in the business of connecting people who are working on open source program offices, open source initiatives in their companies. Cool. So it's this beautiful space where you get to hey y'all, I was trying to do this thing, and they're like, I have a tool for that. Right, they're like, here's how we were reasoning about our metrics program, for example. So being able to get to bounce off of people who are also in the space, doing exactly what you're doing, and in the spirit of open source, not repeating that work and getting to collaborate, on it with people. But in the team, I try to build for everyone having a slightly different focus, stuff that they are interested in, so that we can, so that we've got coverage across multiple groups, right? So I'm also, I focus on OpenSSF. So I'm one of the maintainers for Scorecard and OpenSSF. I'm also on the governing board. So I'm I very much care about your security.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks. I think that was as a good, trip around the OSPO at Cisco from not just networking anymore to what we actually care about, which is getting the people together to make cool things, to do cool stuff with computers, I guess, is still what we're about in open source.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, that's what it's about. It's great.